Thank you. Welcome. My name is Broni Czarnocha, known as Dr. C, and I'm opening the Research Summit Creativity in STEM. And I would like to invite our provost, Dr. Christine Mangino, to welcome you.
Welcome to Hostos Community College. We're excited to host today's conference. And thank you to CUNY Central for their support and for Vice Chancellor Hostos for his participation today. When Dr. Czarnocha came to me with his plan, I was excited. There's a lot of research and the need for students to do something creative with new and difficult information in order for them to retain knowledge. And I share an example frequently of one of my students who, in the middle of a final exam, shouts out, "Oh my gosh, I had to write a poem about this, I know this answer." It really shows that they need to do that creative project in order to retain knowledge. And I also shared with Dr. Czarnocha how I would teach my future teachers. My background is in pedagogy. How to use aha moments when teaching science and math. There's a theory that, students need to have something that doesn't fit into their file cabinets in their brain. So when they take information and they learn new information, they figure, oh, this is where it goes. This is how it makes sense and I know this. But they don't retain that. It's when they go to put the new knowledge into one of the file cabinets and they realize this doesn't match where it's supposed to go. This is not what I'm expecting to see happen. That's when they get excited and are able to then retain that information. So I think today is important in helping our students learn this. So thank you to all our panelists, and thank you to all of our Hostos math faculty for making today happen. We do have the best math faculty, so if you haven't interacted with any of them, try to do so during the day. Besides their knowledge, their content knowledge, and their pedagogy knowledge, they all have a passion for what they do and for the success of our students. So enjoy, and I hope that each of you take something away to use in your own teaching and research.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask our VC, Vice Chancellor for Research, Dr. McCloskey, Daniel McCloskey, to say a couple of words to us.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here, and CUNY Central is really excited to help sponsor today's program. So Dr. Czarnocha came to me, I think maybe about 7 or 8 months ago with Professor Marcinak, about this the idea about this creativity in STEM and the aha moment, and really encouraging faculty to think about ways that we can inspire students. And immediately I was inspired by the idea, and I'm glad to see today as part of that progress. So I know there's broad ambition from this group about really developing this into hopefully an NSF proposal. So I'm hoping that you all get a lot out of today, and that you treat this as a work group, because I think that's the intention of it, is to really start a community of people who are passionate about innovative pedagogy. So innovative pedagogy is something that happens all across CUNY in our 24 campuses and 7,000 full-time faculty and 16,000 part-time faculty, and the teaching of 275 undergraduate and 40,000 graduate students. So CUNY is a massive system, and there's innovative pedagogy in pockets all throughout CUNY, but there's no formalized appreciation and celebration of it. And I know that that's sort of what's inspired Dr. Czarnocha to pull together today's meeting to try to think about a way to formalize this innovative pedagogy that happens all across CUNY. And I think creativity, which is the focus of the theme of today's conference, is a really great first step at doing that. So I'd like to also thank Provost Mangino for hosting us today. Hostos, this is always a great place to have these sorts of venues. It's nice to We're not going to have much sunlight today, but nice to get at least a look at the outside and beautiful artwork that surrounds us here at Hostos. It's always a beautiful setting. I'd also like to thank our panelists who come to us from Rutgers, the IEEE, and William & Mary College to share with us their ideas about innovative pedagogy. I'd also like to take a moment to plug the CUNY Research Office and talk to you about, we have some tools within our office to help to encourage innovative pedagogy. So I'm talking particularly about the pedagogical research grant that we offer every year. It's an award of $10,000 to CUNY faculty who have an idea for innovative pedagogy. And so if you have, are inspired by today's work and want to develop a new form of teaching your class and want to fully assess it and share with us your results, I encourage you to apply for that award within the CUNY Office of Research. CUNY is a national leader in social mobility. We take more students from the lowest 20% percentile in income and propel them to the top 20 percentile than any other university in the nation, and more than all the Ivy League colleges combined. Hostos is top among CUNY two-year schools in this trend. A big part of this capability is the rich diversity within the City University of New York. So we boast that we have 5 out of the 6 most diverse colleges in the Northeast, right here in CUNY. And I think that speaks to our ability to enhance this social mobility for our students. But despite that all we do, we still see achievement gaps, which are particularly pronounced in the STEM disciplines. Despite equal intelligence, students from some backgrounds don't perform well in STEM as others. There are a number of reasons why a student may suffer, including the problem that most STEM educators and professionals don't look like them or share their background and interests. In their own experiences, our organizers have found creativity as a beneficial tool to break through and inspire students by helping them to apply their own interests to solve problems in STEM. The NIH just announced more funding over the next 10 years for what they call Precision Medicine Initiative. So they just invested another $2 billion in this. The idea of this is essentially to track the genes and environments of 1 million Americans with recognition that treatments for most diseases are not a one-size-fits-all solution. We have individual differences that will determine the success of treatments for diseases for some of us over others. The same is true with learning. Every student learns in a unique way. And I see today's summit as an important step in the process of precision pedagogy, developing tools that help students to find the approach that works best for them. Creativity seems to be a great model for us to do that. So I applaud our group of organizers here for putting today's summit together, and I hope to see more development and celebration of innovative pedagogy across CUNY stemming from this conference today. I wish you all the best of luck and wish you a successful work group today. And I think it's a great opportunity. I know that some of you put the papers aside and are busy grading papers and preparing for finals next week. And it's a difficult time to think about new things, but it's also the right time. So as you go into the summer, thinking about how you can form a community of celebrating innovative pedagogy that reaches across CUNY. And I'm looking forward to helping you do that. Thank you very much.
So, from myself, I would like to say that the first order of the day is to recognize and to thank all our scholars who came, invited scholars who came here. So what I will do, I will read out the name of everyone, of every person, and I ask to wait with applause till I run through the whole list alphabetically. And first I would like to welcome Dr. Kochhan from Rutgers University, Geraldine Kochhan. Please, can you stand up and show yourself? From Rutgers University, Office of STEM Education and Department of Physics. I would like to welcome Dr. Valerio De Angelis, who is our industry innovator from Energy Institute in City College. I would like to welcome Mr. Bert Dicht, who is the director of University. Bert, show yourself, yes. Director of University Office of IEEE. I would like to welcome Dr. Gerald Golding, Rutgers University Mathematics and Physics, and Mathematics Education. Mathematics Education. I want to welcome Dr. Kyung-Hee Kim, Specialist in Creativity, from College of William and Mary in Williamsburg. And she will be with us in the second panel. I want to recognize Dr. Moise Kofi from Hostos STEP program, who is, please, Kofi, and Dr. Margot Marciniak from LaGuardia, please, this is one of the members from the competition. Dr. Hazel Oviedo from CCNY, from Neurobiology, thank you very much. And Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, a physicist and astronomer from the University of Washington and University of New Hampshire. Thank you very much, and we are very happy that you came indeed. So I would like to say a couple of words, okay, introduced to the conference. First, I would like to confirm that this is indeed CUNY Research Summit. And what I mean by that is we are exploring here our own creativity as scientists, as teachers as well. So the whole idea is that let's think and let's investigate, let's explore what exactly is creativity, because as I will say in a minute, there is a lot of sort of like not clear what it is. Everyone knows it exists, but what is it? At Hostos we do it because we see creativity as a potent tool with the help of which we can fire our students' imagination and excitement for mathematics, engineering and science. However, during the conversation in the organizing committee, it turned out that each of us in different disciplines had quite different understanding of what creativity is actually. And that's why we devote the morning part precisely to that, to find out from ourselves, what is this creativity. So the plan of the summit is following. Well, before lunch, right? We will have panel 1, and the idea is to have collaboratives after that. We'll see what we do depending on the number of people who come. But the whole idea is that in the panel 1, and I will be moderating the panel, is to talk about your own creativity as a scientist, your own creativity as a teacher, and reflect upon it, right? What do you think about it? I mean, when do you see it in yourself? When do you see it in the classroom? Those things I would like to be sort of primary in our mind when we talk, right? And after lunch, we have a panel 2, providing a view upon theories and understanding of creativity with profession. It's a more theoretical part. And after that, we have concurrent collaboratives where we apply our reflection gain into 3 creativity-related issues. They are important issues, and I will say maybe a couple of words about them later. I also would like to add that our research summit, I call it a dress rehearsal for the NSF Includes sponsored conference next year, for which we submitted application on April 16. And if all of us will keep our fingers crossed till we get it, then we're gonna get it. And we meet next spring here. We plan it more or less in March, not so late. There are stories behind. Let me say a couple of words about this program, because it's a very special program. The NSF Includes is a recent program which addresses underrepresentation of minorities in STEM. And in fact, it has around 50 or 60 projects around the country that are doing exactly that. Each project, those are called pilot projects, right? And they have quite a lot. And however, what was interesting, when I looked into those projects, it turned out that not a single project mentions creativity as a tool of motivation, right? Because we talk about underrepresentation. Therefore, there is actually around 15 projects from this group that express desire to come to us, and if we get the grant, they come and we'll have a really very, not international, national conference about the same issues. Maybe in a year we'll know something more. Yes. Yes, if you look at the latest edition of the program, there are some changes, right? And what is interesting here is that originally we thought about making 3 collaboratives, one devoted to the first one in the morning, one devoted to mathematics, another science, and another engineering. But it turned out something very unusual, which itself, I think, is a research question, which is we got quite a few abstracts from mathematics, but only one from science and none from engineering, which is very interesting, right? Why is it that mathematics would be more interested on, I don't know whether more, but it's sufficiently interested, there is some thinking happening, and we didn't get a single from engineering. That's why I insisted on engineers to come here, maybe more will come, and okay. One thing I want to say, of course, that the collaborative sessions will be taken place in 3 rooms. 2 of them, FDR is behind this wall, JFK is on the other side opposite, and C391 is opposite on the other side. So everything is very close and near, and that's where we hopefully will have our collaboratives. One more thing, no, 2 more things. Let me mention that the folders of the conference contain survey assessment of the research summit. Please fill it up at the end and return to us. And finally, I want to express very deep gratitude to people who helped us to organize, to our administrative assistants, Fidelia Okolo and Lizette Maskos, for their help in dealing with the detail of organization, to my colleagues from mathematics department, from the teaching research team of the Bronx, for their continuous support, and to the conference team whose professionality is the main quality, who helped us to put up the whole thing, right? And now, without further ado, I am inviting everyone to the panel 1, to which I want to invite, let me get this, yes, Dr. Goldie, please, here, Dr. Oviedo, yes, please, Dr. De Angelis, and Dr. Marciniak. And I sort of will try to moderate this. Please sit down, sit down. So what I really would like each of you to tell us about is exactly your own creativity. When do you meet it? What are the conditions? What do you feel? What do you think? How do you facilitate the moments of discovery? Do your methods and observations remain in alignment with any known theory of creativity, or do you need to build your own theory? Your thoughts and observations on the role of creativity and interesting and retaining female and minority population are thought and welcome. So, who would like to start first? Maybe Jerry, would you like to? Please.
So, let me just start by thanking Brony for the invitation to be here, and it's a real pleasure to speak with such a distinguished group. Another thing I want to say is creativity is a very intimate experience. So in talking about it, takes a lot of reflection and a certain amount of intimacy. So in the interest of intimacy, may I invite people who are sitting toward the back, if you would like to move forward, it will be a more intimate conversation.
Right. It will be more intimate.
So maybe the first 4 rows, it would be really lovely. I don't want to disrupt where you are, but if you'd like to move to the front, it would be a great thing to do. Thank you. So I was asked to think first about the aha experience. And I thought of 3 different kinds of aha experiences that I've had. And in the available time, I can just really talk about one. The first was an experience as an undergraduate, which was an aha experience of having insight into something abstract in mathematics. And the second was an experience I had in the late 1980s, which involved a scientific discovery. That's the one I'll talk more about. And the third was a much more recent experience I had in solving a recreational mathematics problem. And so these are 3 very different contexts of learning of mathematics in a college course, scientific activity, and just doing something for fun. The one I want to talk about is the second, but let me say that there's quite a literature on creativity in mathematics education. A special issue of ZDM, ZDM Mathematics, which is the International Education Journal in Mathematics Education, was devoted to this topic, and I think it's early last year, 2017. And among the distinctions that are made is sometimes called small c and big C for creativity. And small c is the kind of creativity where a student may discover something that for that student is new, but it's not new in the field of mathematics. It's known, but the student's discovery was a creative act for the student, and so psychologically. And big C is the kind of creativity where something really new is found, something that nobody knew before. Of the 3 examples in my life that I'm referring to, the first one was not creative at all. It was an insight into something I was being taught, but it was an aha experience that was very vivid, because now I understood so much, and before I didn't. The second was a big C activity. I found something that wasn't previously known scientifically. And the third was small c. It was recreational and probably known, but for me it was new and different and exciting. So I'll talk about the second one just a little bit. I was looking into quantum mechanics, and quantum theory is very well established theory in physics. It involves operators on a linear space, Hilbert space. Fundamental to quantum mechanics is a principle of superposition, that if you have 2 solutions in quantum mechanics, their sum is also a solution. It's a wave superposition. Very fundamental, often taken as an axiom of quantum mechanics. And there are 2 kinds of linear operators that are very important in quantum mechanics, and the details of this, if you don't have this background, are not too important to my story, but I have to lay it out. One of these is called self-adjoint operators, which are operators that describe the outcomes of physical measurements. And another kind of operators are called unitary operators, and these operators describe symmetries of the system. So what I was looking at was the question of how one could find a quantum mechanical system that obeyed certain symmetries. And I found a lot of representations by unitary operators of these symmetries, and some of them corresponded to very interesting physical systems. But there was one representation that I just couldn't figure out how to interpret. And I was collaborating with a German professor, Professor Heinz-Dietrich Döbner, who's since retired, and we were both working on this problem, having independently discovered these representations, but neither of us knew how to interpret it in physics. So the problem was, what differential equation that satisfied the conditions of quantum mechanics could possibly correspond to this symmetry? And we worked on it for a couple of years. We had some ideas. Nothing seemed to work. Finally, I said, well, maybe I can prove that it doesn't exist. So I started trying to show that it doesn't exist, and I was making a lot of progress. I practically had a theorem to show there was no quantum mechanical system that would correspond to this. So I was visiting Professor Dubner in Germany, and I remember it very vividly. It was an unfamiliar setting to me in Germany. I was functioning with my inadequate German to talk with people and sitting in a room, but I was feeling very good because it's nice to be away from home and visiting another university and spending some time there, kind of relax, away from teaching for a little while, had some good discussions with Dubner. And I'm sitting there and thinking about this question and working on my proof. My proof involves superposition principle. And then it occurred to me, well, what if I give up the superposition principle? Can't do that. It's fundamental to quantum mechanics. It's an axiom. Yeah, but what if I don't use it? So it's going to mean a nonlinear differential equation. My gosh, there's a very natural and interesting equation that works. And there was this moment, an aha moment, where suddenly all sorts of doors opened up. I could see connections, I could see ways of getting solutions, but also all kinds of questions opened up. Like, well, what would that mean in quantum mechanics? If you give up the superposition principle, it's no longer standard quantum mechanics. But we talk about physics, what would it mean for physics? Start exploring that. So among the things that hit me as I worked on this, is all within a week, was the sense that, you know what, this is going to be get me in a lot of trouble as a physicist, because you can't go out challenging conventional quantum mechanics and say there's something wrong with it. So on the other hand, this fits symmetry really nicely. So there has to be something behind it. So it led me to a lot of ideas, including the question, what is the importance of a theory that does not fit the convention? Suppose physics is linear. Suppose this does not correspond to an actual physical system. Is there any value in it? Or do we throw it away and say nature doesn't work that way? Well, actually, if quantum mechanics is linear, that's an empirical result. There has to be measurements that tell us this. If we have a set of nonlinear theories, we can try to understand what is it that singles out the linear theory. What criterion, what principle is nature using to choose the linear theory from this whole class of possible nonlinear theories? On the other hand, there's also some error of measurement. So what's the upper bound on the nonlinearity that we've determined experimentally? So all sorts of questions can be asked if you have a theory that generalizes an existing theory, even when that generalization is not necessarily what nature obeys. Well, this way of thinking gave me confidence, and so I did a lot of exploration with this. We came up with many, many results, which are published. It was recognized with an award from the Humboldt Foundation, so there were a lot of nice things. But I remember very vividly that combination of happiness, insight, the feeling, oh, this is really my art. This is what I learned how to do, and now work this out, and how exciting it was. At the same time, the feeling of being scared. Because, physics is an established community. There's a lot of ideas that are out there that everybody knows. This was something I knew too, that quantum mechanics satisfies a superposition principle, and suddenly, through no fault of my own and no desire of my own, I find myself wanting to contradict this well-known principle, or at least consider the possibility of contradicting it. So that was one experience, a big C experience, because these equations were not previously studied, and it was very satisfying. So one thing I take away from all of this is that creativity, the act of creativity, the aha experience, is a very complex phenomenon. It's not something that one can just characterize and label and say this is creative behavior and this is uncreative behavior. An awful lot of uncreative behavior was needed, and uncreative activity was needed in order to set the stage for the creative act. And the creative act may have depended just as much on being in Germany in an unfamiliar setting as it did on the knowledge of the science or the knowledge of the mathematics. So in my work with mathematics teachers, I try to do a lot about creativity and a lot about problem solving and the importance of valuing students' quote wrong answers, because every wrong answer that comes in a teaching situation is an opportunity to explore something. So when a student comes up with something wrong, they should be complimented on it. They had not only the courage to offer the answer, but if it turns out to be wrong, that doesn't mean the student should bow their head in humiliation. It means that in the process of determining why it didn't work, we learned a lot more than we would have learned if we had only followed the so-called correct procedure. So that idea that every mathematics teacher should learn to value the wrong answers that come from the students and to communicate that value so that then later in life, can we violate the superposition principle? No, because to do so is the wrong answer. Yes, but maybe there's something to be learned from exploring. So that's my brief.
Thank you very much. Would anyone would like to ask something or comment? Or we do it after all our colleagues present? Hazel, would you like next? Please.
Good morning. So I want to build off of what was just talked about in terms of creativity. And for me, creativity is 100% intertwined with problem solving and persistence. And that's something I struggle to teach not just students, but my own daughter. You have to be persistent. You can't give up. Just because you fail to understand something immediately doesn't mean you can't. You have to fail in order to actually get somewhere and keep at it. And that really makes a difference between someone who gets very far and someone who doesn't. It's just your ability to just keep going in the face of failure. So that's something that is deeply, deeply intertwined with creativity, is not giving up. But more specifically for me, because I'm an experimentalist, problem solving is a really big aspect of creativity for me. So I encounter problems in the lab on a daily basis. It could be something simple like something broke, and I have to figure out a quick way of fixing it without having to spend a long time waiting for a piece of equipment to arrive, or just basically making do by the tools you have in hand right away. So you need a fast way of fixing a problem and being creative with the materials that you have in front of you. So that to me is like a daily source of creativity, and that is I need to fix this immediately so I can keep going. So that really kind of keeps the juices flowing for you intellectually, and to keep building your ability to keep running, keep going with your experiments. So that's one aspect of creativity that's very satisfying for me, actually. The other is, of course, a much more cerebral, intellectual aspect of creativity, and that occurs, of course, when you sit down to actually write a research proposal. And that is kind of a double-edged sword, because it is extremely satisfying to think of creative experiments or proposals that you want to do, and that's a great kind of mental exercise. But then the flip side of that is you need to also tailor it such that it will be funded. So it's a very kind of interesting process mentally, because you are encouraged to be creative, but at the same time you really have to be practical. So that's kind of when you encounter these limits of creativity in a way imposed upon you by the external world. So you can't just let your imagination run amok. You really have to rein in your creativity to make something that's actually doable, fundable, etc. So this is kind of like more practical aspects of creativity. Another very enjoyable moment of creativity is in the classroom. So you come in with your slides, you know the thing you have to teach, you start teaching it, and then all of a sudden someone asks a really interesting question. You have to think on your feet real fast, okay, how am I going to explain this in a way that is understandable to the students? And it's something in a way that you hadn't thought of before, or it's a concept that they're struggling with. And I really enjoy those moments where I have to just stand there in real time, think on my feet, and create a different way of explaining something to a student. And hopefully they get as much out of it as I did, because I got a lot out of it, because I had to stand there and think really quickly about a way to make this understandable to them, for the entire class. And while we're on the topic of classroom experiences, that's something that I've actually built upon in terms of creativity in the classroom. And that's also a very important part of the NSF career award process. So when I came to City College, I was lucky enough to be immediately recruited into a program where basically we make bioanimations of scientific biological processes. So I was recruited to be the team leader, the professor, leading a group of students from the visual arts and science to make animations of biological processes. And that's actually been a really interesting experience in terms of exploring just innovative classroom experiences and creativity. And what I've learned from this is that you take a group of students with different backgrounds, and you put them together, and you lead them into with a vision of a particular target, and it is amazing what you can get out of them, because they'll sit together and you give them an idea, and they'll work with one another to really figure out, okay, how can we animate this process, this biological process? And what I realized at the end is that you cannot do an animation of a very mechanistic animation of a biological process without understanding it in detail. So you really have to sit there and say, okay, how does this protein interact with this other molecule? What's it doing once it leaves the cell, once it enters the cell, once it binds to this, once it binds to that, and then ultimately what is the organism doing with this or that. So it really, in order to actually get a final product that's of pedagogical value to everybody else, not only are the students who go through that creative process benefiting themselves, but you're also putting out something that will be useful to other students. So student-led, student-made, and ultimately the students will use it to learn. And this not only has benefits for, of course, their creativity and intellectual development, but it turns out that these efforts of open educational tools is really important to bring down the cost of education, because the cost of textbooks is really high, and it actually leads to a lot of dropout rates in the, especially at the community college level. So producing open educational tools like these animations are really helpful for retention rates. And one of the latest things we're working on is not just passive animations, but also interactive animations. So we're building websites where students can actually go in and manipulate something about the biological process to further understand how it works. So it's interactive, it's input and output, so they can really test their knowledge of the biological system. So in essence, these are the kinds of creativity activities that I've been kind of working with for the last 4 to 5 years. I've been a professor, and they all feed upon each other, because the more I engage in trying to figure out how to help students, that further feeds into my ability to do research with undergraduates, because I understand more their thinking, I understand what are the gaps in knowledge that need to be filled. I'm coming up with ways of how to fill them, and then that ultimately feeds into the research program and the kinds of research proposals that I can put together that would help them. And the other thing that I've also tried to incorporate in my classroom are hands-on demonstrations. So right now there's just a lot of good opportunities to buy cheap tools, cheap experimental tools to bring into the classroom, especially in neuroscience. There's a wonderful company called Backyard Brains that sells these little amplifiers, those spiker boxes, that way you can just take a cockroach leg, hook it up to this little device and stimulate it, and you can see little action potentials happen in the computer. So I like to bring that into some of my classes, so that instead of just this kind of abstract knowledge in a slide, I take a real system and I show them, okay, this is what actually happened in the nervous system. Here it is, here's the output, here's what I'm doing, and here's how that changes the output. And I think those kinds of bringing in more hands-on demonstrations and activities are really, really important for STEM learning. You really got to bring into the classroom research components, and now it's a great time because there's so many cheap and affordable resources available that you can just easily, miniaturize devices that you can bring into the classroom very easily and incorporate that into the learning experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone would like to ask something? Say something? Not yet. Okay. Małgosiu, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the panel. So, I would like to describe my experience, my creative experience that happened approximately 2 years ago. It was a pure coincidence that my 2 consecutive classes were scheduled in the same room, so I was 30 minutes before my next class, already in the room, and it happened that 2 of my students were there as well, every week or the entire semester. So naturally we started talking about casual things. Where do we go for coffee? What do we do between classes and so on? So at some point, we started talking about possible projects that students would do within topics that they are interested in, but those topics should involve some mathematics. So in the beginning we were, let's say, jumping randomly between different topics, but at some point one student said that she would be really interested in finding projects that involve architecture, because she's a civil engineer, and mathematics. And I thought that's perfect, because we were in calculus 3 class, which is a multivariable calculus, and we were drawing lots of pictures on the board, and I thought it has to happen. We will have some good project that will involve geometry that is applicable to architecture. So at some point, the other student said that he's interested in solar panels. So we started searching different kinds of solar panels, and we found out that there's new technology available. Transparent, flexible solar panels. And architecture student said that she would like to just wrap a building up with solar panels. Why not? And I thought, no, that's wrong, because it's a very inefficient way of placing those panels. And then I said, well, we should probably search for models, mathematical models that would give us some value of efficiency, of just purely geometrical efficiency that would tell us, well, this position of the panel is not good. We should search for another one. So we started searching through different databases, and we did not find any mathematical models that would describe efficiency of flexible panels. We found models for flat panels, but they were rigid and it simply did not match our needs. So approximately during summer 2017, we started working on building mathematical model. It took us approximately 3 months to set up the equations, verify them, and then start doing calculations. So if you're a mathematician, I can tell you that the model is based on mathematical flux across the surface of the panel, and we simply use the trajectory of the sun to derive a vector field. So we have to calculate triple integrals to find values of efficiency. So my students, when they were working on this project with me, I realized very quickly that they were different than in the classroom. I could not exactly and precisely say what the difference was, but my impression was that they were more excited about the project, more involved, they carried more enthusiasm. And then I started reading about theories of creativity, because I thought that maybe I can pinpoint the difference between their mindset in classroom and their mindset while working on the project. And then I found out that the theories of creativity that I read about did not exactly match what we were going through. So we were not going through the 4 stages of creativity, we're going more through cycles of creativity, and this repetitiveness that we were meeting every week and we were returning to the same topic made me realize that we really work in say flows and cycles, because we set a problem, we find some solutions after moments of insight, and then we want to verify whether our solutions are correct. But it generates more questions and generates more inquiries. So we go through the same cycle again and again. And this repetition eventually leads us to happiness and enthusiasm that we need so much when we work in the classroom. So what really struck me in this entire process of working with students was that before, in my previous experiences of creativity, it was an individual experience. I had moments of creativity while working on my PhD dissertation or when solving problems, and it was a feeling of being intimate within my own mind. But here, I experienced creativity on the boundaries of interaction with other people who had entirely different background than me. So my students, I realized they're somehow naive with their way of thinking, but at the same time they're fresh. Versus I have some experience and my mind is more rigid. So when I asked my students what creative moments they experienced, they said the same thing, but the interaction with a different mind. That's what they found the most inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Not yet. Okay. Valerio, let me ask you.
Yeah, I have a slide. Please, not to create trouble. Let me just start now.
They are also on those two. Those two rows. Yeah, it's visible from there, yes.
So my name is Valerio De Angelis. I'm with the CUNY Energy Institute of City College. We are an engineering group, and thanks for pointing out you didn't get a lot of engineers. How many engineers? I know you are from. Oh, these 3 of us. So good, these 3 of us. Okay. So when you asked me to participate, this is a entirely new area of exploration for me. How creativity and STEM work together. We are an engineering department, so creativity makes it into our life, but it's not in a systematic or pedagogical way. So I went back to experiences that either I or my children have lived over the years. So, and I've observed, I have a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I can see how STEM curriculum is becoming more and more pervasive from the very beginning. My daughter had handouts where she could draw, color, and solve with paper and pencil. My son's all homeworks are on iPad now. So we, by the way, as a side effect, we don't get to see what he does anymore. Everything is in his little iPad. And also I observed that they are doing a lot more. They're doing a lot more, and then I found this sentence on the Department of Education. The US curriculum is a mile long and an inch deep. And it kind of, as a parent of a 12-year-old, it starts doing true to me. And STEM is important for very good reasons. If you look at what's happening to the US economy and to the opportunities that STEM is bringing to all of us, to our children, to our neighbors, to our communities. This is a chart of the so-called unicorn club. So these are companies that have surpassed $1 billion valuation. and it's an enormous amount of money, right? Some of them are well known, Airbnb, Spotify, Pinterest, SpaceX, and we're going to Mars. So MongoDB, for those of you who fuss with the computers. Some of them are like, what is this? Like there is a company named Moderna, which I don't know for how long. They can stay modern, but that's the name they pick. And there are some that came and went, like Theranos. That was like this multi-billion-dollar enterprise that then failed. But in any case, this is what we want for our children, for our neighbors, for ourselves, for our colleagues. We want to be part of this growing movement by technology. And so that's why STEM is becoming more and more important in our schools. And that's the way it should be. So I'm an engineer, I build products. And this is the collective amount of value that the companies are really involved with us create. Yeah, so I just a little bit of the tip. So I'm not in the club, I'm not an expert, so whatever I tell you, take it as a grain of salt. So I went back to what made me an engineer. Moments I've had growing up that I remember, so some are very important to me. And the first one was a moment of discovery and inspiration, which I had when I was about 8 years old. And I was just doing stuff with my dad. And this is what we do. Now, how many of you know that you can make a radio without a battery? So what happened in the 30s during the war, the military, they had no batteries, they had nothing, right? But they still wanted to be in touch. They wanted to know what was going on. So everybody started to build this radios. It's kind of amazing. So you basically take a little coil, you attach it to a earphone, then you take a pencil, you stick a needle in it, put the pencil by an oxidized, burned out razor blade, connect it to ground, and somehow you get a radio station. I mean, this for me, it was the most incredible thing. And imagine my surprise when I was scouting the internet for pictures of what my dad and I did, and I found this. So this is from some gentleman called Cullen, April 7, 2016. This is the first time I tried this, it didn't work, it was frustrating. But I just went through my materials, glued the razor blade, and it worked. The second time I tried to get it to work, I couldn't get a station, I just got a pass. I played it with everything and finally figured out that the ground connection wasn't very good. When I fixed that, I was able to hear sport talk radio. Now, this blew my mind. So this is exactly, that's well disclosed. 40 years later, right? Somebody had the same experience. And for me, it wasn't frustrating. My dad had me, right? So, and this is one of those moments from my childhood that made me realize that magic is possible. I mean, just even to this day, that you can put something together without any source of energy and collect something that is in the air that gives you information. Even to this day, amazes me. So that gave me the strength. So, I can do stuff. I mean, at least my dad can do stuff. So, and then my dad, by the way, was a government worker. It was Hostos. This is Italy. Italy, the great thing about Italy is that everybody's the same. There is the difference between the top 20% and the bottom 20% is nothing. Is it? And that I think was a great driver of ambition, and experimenting growing up. So I'll go now to something that happened to me when I was a teenager. I had a need, I needed friends. Like most teenagers had no friends, or at least I was the only child, so I wanted friends. I need to think for a solution, I need resources, and then I need to make it work. This was my solution. I wanted the video game station. Now, believe it or not, in the mid-80s, this was like state-of-the-art, this was the game kids wanted to play. I mean, Space Invaders and come on. So this is what I wanted, but I needed resources. So I exploited my mom's weakness, which is pretty much every mom's weakness. By the way, happy Mother's Day, tomorrow's Mother's Day. I said, this is what I need a computer for. I'm going to make charts, I'm going to learn math, I'm going to make graphs, buy me a computer. She went for it. She got me a computer. So I got this machine called SB328, which nobody knows what it is, for good reasons, in fact. So this was a computer that was released in the 80s, and very short-lived. It came with a manual and a blue screen. That's all. I obviously had not thought this through. Later on, the SB728 came out. It's the first home computer from Spectra Video that compiled fully with MSX home computer specification. It was introduced in 1985. The design is virtually identical to that of the earlier SB328, which did not fully comply with the MSX standard. No games. I had the computer with the blue screen and a manual. So I could make my own game. Took 1 year. It was the slowest space inverter if you let it. It was horrifying. Nobody wanted to play. Even I didn't want to play. It was just ridiculous. It's probably what brought me here. The reason I went to engineering is the struggle I have to go through. It's pretty funny, actually, in retrospect. And that brings me to the STEM skills, right? It's what then I, as a 19-year-old, had to deal with when I went to engineering school in Naples, where we had to wake up at 6 o'clock to get a chair in the classroom. It was hard. It wasn't fun at all. I mean, whoever says that engineering classes, especially the first year, is fun, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. It was gruesome. And you get it, right? This is what the Foxhole radio is about on Wikipedia, right? The thing I built with my dad when I was 8. Foxhole radios were built using numerous designs. All of them receive AM, amplitude modulation, radio transmission without the need for a power source. They use an antenna and it goes on with an inductor, a diode, a rectifier, a Scottish diode in fact. And the coil has internal parasitic capacitance and therefore acts as a LC resonator, which is all right. I mean, this is how the thing works. But if I had not had that 8-year-old experience, there's no way I would have been able to go through this. It's just not something my brain would have been able to process. And the computer is even worse. I mean, if you go to the fundament of computer science and why computers work, this is literally gibberish, right? This is assembly language. It's what the computer does to process information. So LDHL MSG, you basically in a registry, you're loading a message, and the message is hello. Right? This is what a computer has to do to go from that to this. Right? So imagine if, as in my mind, if I had been exposed to this level of complexity without having done the Foxhole radio or without having done the Space Invader, I just don't see it. But then all those experiences that I was lucky enough to have, the discovery, the inspiration, the need, the resource.
And this is what we see in our classrooms. So how do we work with them, especially at the undergraduate level, to have these kind of experiences then? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Actually, if you don't mind, I'll take that one because it is really close to as an engineering department to my heart. So you're absolutely right. The fundamental problem I see going into college and engineering is the curriculum is so demanding that even if we have male science kits waiting for students, they might never find the time to explore it. Right? That is one thing we have to recognize as STEM students and now educators, is that the homework is intense. Like the concepts are difficult. But what we found, and unfortunately it's episodical, and again, how do we institutionalize it is the question. We have a problem where we hire a lot of undergrads because we need help in the lab and everything like that. So there is this student, she's from Tennessee, she came from City College. She wanted to study computer science. She just could not get past the intro computer science class. It was too much. She just couldn't do it. It just like she tried, the hours were bad, the lab was difficult, she was new to a big city coming from Tennessee. But she came to our lab and now she's designing, but then, one thing led to the other. She was very precise, very good with her hands. So she could build the some little batteries we were making extremely well. It's amazing, like the ability. So, it's possible. We helped her. No, not we, collectively the group. And now if I tell you what it does, it's kind of frightening. She's designing the mechanical high voltage systems that go in some of our large installations. Right? So her ability for details allowed her to design mechanical systems to house battery and battery systems, which is as easy to put together as an IKEA piece of furniture. Right, so, but how, the part that was the hardest for her was first to abandon the computer science program that she loved and go to photography, which became a plan B for her. And even in that, her biggest struggle was to find the time to come to lab. So somehow, we have to let kids or adults or students discover their inner kid, and they can do that at any age. Like this student is the example. You just have no idea of the detail and precision of the work she does now. Right? And the question is to everybody is how do you institutionalize that? It's not that the tools are not there, the passions are not there, the good intentions are not there, and that's the question I pose back to everybody else.
Yeah, I also have some thoughts on that. So number one, I think universities need more of an open lab environment because I think we were talking about this before this panel, that professors are overwhelmed with undergraduates who want to work in their labs. And we just don't have the resources or the time to train all of them. We have to turn away students all the time because of our enormous commitments elsewhere. So there's a model going around, I don't know if you've heard of something called BioBus, and there are others like this in which, so what's happening is they're taking advantage of the fact that super qualified, intelligent, smart people are dropping out of academia, and they're siphoning them into these programs where, and attract people who want to reach out to more community efforts and who want to really engage and teach underprivileged kids. So BioBus is one of these efforts, and it's, they literally started with just a bus where they bring kids to do experiments. But now they actually have a space at Columbia University that was donated by them, and they bring in kids from the community, and they teach them how to build cheap microscopes and do basic experiments and things like that. So we need more of those efforts where anybody can come in, but you do need the staff, the qualified staff, to help them and guide them through the technology and the experiments. It just can't be like a babysitting situation where they just do whatever. So we need money for these efforts. The DNA Learning Center is another of these efforts where they have several campuses where they take kids starting at the age of 12 and teach them basic molecular biology techniques. You can apply to them and it's free if you get into the program. But the other thing is that the story of science and success is full of people who started late, who didn't find their calling until late. And that's completely an accepted path in science. I have a student in my lab who's 30 years old and just started his PhD. He was a music major, he did music for a long time. And it wasn't until his mid-20s that he said, I want to do neuroscience. And he went, you get into enormous debt and you do a master's and you get yourself in the field and in the path. But, I think that there isn't just one point in your life where you have to be siphoned into STEM. You can find that point at any time. And as long as, you have the drive and motivation and someone sees that in you, there are a lot of opportunities. So I think that there isn't just a one missed opportunity for somebody. I think when you have the drive and perseverance, there's just a lot out there that will bring you into the fold and you can take advantage.
Your question reminded me about my recent visit to the Children Creativity Museum in San Francisco. So I went to that museum to do research on creative assignments, and I realized that that museum they generated different assignments for different ages of children. So I thought if I could just go through all those different rooms and just play by myself. So I thought if we open a similar facility for students, even faculty would come and play. So one of the rooms contained robots. So 10-year-old kids were designing robots and making the robots draw pictures. So I could see how excited the kids were. So if we could have a facility like this at CUNY, I would be very happy to go there every week and simply design something, just play for joy. Thank you.
Would you like to say something, please?
I'll just say something about mathematics in this area. A number of misconceptions that are very prevailing in mathematics. One is the idea that mathematical talent and giftedness has something to do with speed. And this criterion of speed combined with accuracy, which is the second criterion, functions as a filter at every stage in education to shepherd students out of pursuing mathematics. I have two daughters, so I've been interested in women in mathematics for a long, long time. My older daughter in 7th grade went into a regional program for talented 7th graders in mathematics in Illinois. When the program started, there were something like 8 boys and 7 girls accepted into this program. The completion was by 7 boys and 2 girls. My daughter was one of the 2 girls who finished. The other girl also had a father who was a professor of mathematics, and my daughter got a C in the course, which for her was rather devastating, and she was quite persuaded that she was no good at mathematics. My second daughter also was accepted into a gifted program in mathematics, and for that program, they had to be released from their regular school in 7th grade in order to participate. So this was done in the context of the high track students in the regular school, except my daughter didn't qualify as a high track student in the regular school in mathematics, and I was told by the teacher that she just wasn't good enough to be in that track. So both my daughters had failures at a critical moment in their adolescence in mathematics. The older one is now a full professor of mathematics, and the second a full professor of biostatistics, and with extremely successful careers. So what's the discrepancy here? Why is the diagnosis in middle school that these girls aren't really destined to go in that direction, while their career paths take them there? And a big part of the discrepancy at the time had to do with expectations for boys and girls, which are still there, and despite all of the discussions that we have about the importance of women in STEM education, those differential expectations are still there in the schools, often functioning unconsciously. And the second has to do with this criterion of speed and accuracy. A deep thinker in mathematics takes a lot longer than a superficial thinker in mathematics to solve the same questions. The superficial thinker in mathematics, I'll use the pronoun he, often does not understand that he does not understand. Consequently, thinks he is very good and solves the problems quickly and correctly. The deep thinker in mathematics, I use the pronoun she, the deep thinker in mathematics understands there are things she doesn't understand. Consequently, questions her own ability because it looks to her like everybody else understands. They're solving it very quickly, and she's taking longer, and she may be the only one who understands that she doesn't understand, because she's trying to understand it, and the others are simply trying to get the answer. So so this is just one illustration, but this was functioning for both of my daughters in 7th grade. And so it took a little bit of knowledgeable intervention to restore the positive self-image, to persuade the school that they were misevaluating in this context, without being a professor in mathematics with expertise in mathematics education. I don't think I could have done it. But I had some authority, because I was coming from a place of knowing something. So it's not easy at all, especially when we talk about students whose parents don't have that level of expertise, don't have that level of understanding. So what we can do at the collegiate level is notice. We can project the concept that every student has a mathematical voice, just as every student has a writing voice, and every student has the ability to think. But we don't tap this. And as instructors, we can notice, we can be alert to the presence of this, the possibility that someone who understands that they don't understand is actually a lot deeper thinker than someone who simply knows how to get the answer. And I work with students from time to time, and just this week, a woman studying to be a teacher of mathematics, very, very good, in my opinion, is failing complex variables, which I'm not teaching. And she's failing it, and she showed me the assignments and so forth. I understand perfectly well why she's failing it. This involves a lot of algebra being done very fast in order to answer some questions in the context of the examination. She hasn't developed that level of proficiency with the speed of calculation, but she is asking, what does it mean? And the questions aren't about what it means. The questions are about how do you do it. So I try to help, tutor, and so forth. But I think that it's that opportunity for intervention to notice and to restore the self-confidence and to be able to assist sometimes with the institutional obstacles like this one that make all the difference.
Yes, please.
Okay, I listened to all the panelists. Really, I found a common point about the discussion, and it seems to me that creativity, especially in science and engineering, this has to start at a really early age. Like the middle school years, where students are curious, they want to develop their curiosity, they want to discover, they ask so many questions. And this is the best time, I think, to expose them to project-based learning, as you were saying. So based on these presentations, I think the panelist was working with the father and so on, learned many things there. And then later on, he used that experience. So I think most of the time, the best way to create or maybe to produce more scientists, engineers, I think has to start really in middle school or in high school, expose them to the material, and then later on, when we develop the abstract reasoning, they will be able to connect and to relate to what they saw, because without that, and I understand that, but that's the reason why undergraduate students, sometimes they have difficulties finding their majors because they've never been exposed to the materials, they heard of it, they never practiced, and then, they spend some time to go from major to major, trying to know what it is, and then by the time they discover, they're old, and then they make a choice. So creativity, I think everybody can be creative. But prior knowledge is very important. The experience that you have, is very important because you put everything together for something to come out of it. So this is something that I wanted to add to the ideas, the discussion of the panelists. So the aha moments need to be nurtured, or maybe there need to be a foundation for so many aha moments to happen in higher education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
As an engineer, I had a great experience to work on a brand new aircraft for the Air Force when I worked at Northrop. And it was the most fun I could have as an engineer because we could do anything. It wasn't an existing aircraft. We didn't win the competition, and I got moved over to another program and encountered engineers that were kind of like, well, you suggest trying to do something new, and they'd say, why would we want to do that? We've been doing it this way for X amount of years. And it was startling to me to encounter that. So I realized creativity sometimes can be stifled by the environment that you're in. And I've given a lot of talks to future engineers about being creative, innovative. What do you see as a great way to help instill in students to make sure those things don't happen to them when they become engineers or other STEM professionals? Because I can see that. At some point, these engineers must have been wanting to do things differently or better, and they got into this rut. Nope, we can't do it because we've done it that way for all these years.
Well, for science, I just wanted to say that I encountered this question a lot in experimental science. And here's the thing, in order to actually get to the point of creativity, you need to build a knowledge base, a strong knowledge base. So when you start in a lab in a project, you need to spend quite a long time getting proficient at the very basic foundations of what you're doing to get to the point of being creative. So you need to put your time in, basically, that's what I'm trying to say. So what we can tell students is that you do want to go to an environment where you're heard. So you will definitely get the foundation that you need, but you do want to end up in a place where your voice counts, your advisor actually listens to you. They may not let you do whatever you want to do because there is this idea that you need to learn the basics. But you do need to be in an environment where it's not someone who's just shutting everybody down. Like, no, you're not doing this way, so everybody's voice is being stifled and there's just one person dictating everything. So you do want to go into an environment where you feel like everyone is being listened to, so that you know when you do have a good idea that you will actually be paid attention to. So you have to be aware of things, but you also can't go into a place gung-ho, like, yeah, I'm going to do things, I'm going to do them from the beginning. There are people who get a little too cocky right away without learning the basics first. So you do have to kind of, be a little bit careful about the kind of advice you give to students, because you just can't expect to go into a lab and start calling the shots right away and putting down the advisor before you actually know what you're doing. So you got these power plays sometimes that are quite unpleasant because both people are very stubborn about the environment.
I've, like you, I've managed or interacted with engineers that live all over the world, and one thing I feel, it's limiting the creativity of many of us is our fear of failure. Every time you do something different, you're out there. You may fail. There is nothing. And it's how do you learn how to fail? And how do you learn that it's okay to fail as long as you recover or do that? Sometimes even if you don't. I think is something that somehow has to be part or should be part of STEM curriculum, so to speak. And because the older we get, the consequences of our failure, both professionally for the work we do and personally for the embarrassment we get, the stakes become higher and higher. So how do you create classes? My other question to the educators, where it's okay to fail. Where failure is one of the outcomes. The first class in my life in which failure was okay outcome was in graduate school. Just think about it. I've gone through endless cycles of education, I always had to pass the exam. Failure was just not an option, right? And I understand, it's the same problem we keep facing. There's so many students, it's a machine, like you're saying, the accuracy and speed, what I came to realize, accuracy and speed, they're easy to measure. Doubt, how do you measure doubt? It's a measure of doubt. So, and again, sometimes, the cockiness comes from a defensiveness state, right? By knowing you're weak and don't want to show you failed, and so that inability to accept failure pushes you to unreasonable positions. And it'd be great, if as engineers and educators and scientists, we could figure this out, because that I think will have done another thing.
I would like to one point. So as I understand, your question was about everlasting battle between the free thought and the direction and the needs of the world. So as a mathematician, I have to admit that first time I heard firsthand about this kind of struggle from an engineering company, but my students forced me to go and meet a company that design shaped funnels. So that's exactly what we do, but we do theory and they do practice. So they confirmed that there is no model, and they explained that engineers are not going to create this model because it will take too much time and too much effort, and they need to solve problems. They are paid for solving problems, not for building theories. That's what we do in academia. So the answer for you, if you want to take that answer, is simply go to academia. Here we don't have to solve problems. We just work on research that we like. Thank you.
You give me a problem to solve in mathematics, and I try it several times, and it doesn't work. My first strategy fails, and my second strategy fails, and I feel frustrated. So what do I do? Well, speaking personally, I say, please don't tell me. I really want to do this. This is a very interesting and exciting problem, because it's intriguing now, because I was frustrated. So my metacognition is that my efforts to this point have not succeeded. I need to really think deeply about this to find a different strategy, a different approach. And our meta-affect is, I like the frustration. That's what makes it interesting. If I could solve it the first time, it would have been a routine task and not an intriguing problem. So I think both metacognition, meta-affect are extremely important to creativity, to having the persistence, to having the continuing interest, and to having the strategies, both affective and cognitive, for being able to get underneath the problem to a deeper level.
The same, huh? Go ahead.
So this is a very challenging question. So personally, I'm a great fan of metacognition and observing mental processes of myself and my students. However, I'll quote Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi that he suggested that young researchers should not spend too much time metacogniting because that might take energy away from their process of creativity. So I can see if I would point out too much while doing research with students that they should think about how they think, they might not arrive to the results because they will be distracted. So as mature researchers, I think it's extremely valuable that we do metacognition on a daily basis. But for younger researchers, I'll have some resistance. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add that something that's getting a little bit lost here is that getting to that aha moment is very personal. So I don't think all this, trying to really hammer one particular approach is very useful at all. So we're all been talking about the strategies, X, Y, and Z, inbox, outbox, persistent, not persistent, doing this, doing that. That's all great to talk about and to, expose students to all these kinds of different approaches, but it's a very personal thing. I mean, we can only give them the tools and our experiences to get there in the foundation, but they gotta find out for themselves what that what meant the steps in the mental process that they personally need to get there. So I don't think it's something you can dictate or in a handbook or hammer down anybody's throat.
Well, yes, you would like to say something?
Yeah, I would like our panelists to address creativity also from a cultural perspective, because in CUNY we have students that come from diverse perspectives, and they come also with cultural processes of thinking about things. So how do you get them to harness their cultural perspectives to be creative in whatever you are teaching them? Thank you.
Please, who would like to respond to this? Please.
I studied about cultural impact on creativity a lot. First of all, I compared between Asian people's creativity and Jewish people's creativity. So you might think I'm racist, but so I analyzed the Nobel Prize laureates, Nobel Prize winners, and I found that compared to Asian people like me, Jewish people, if you are Jewish person, you have 625 times more likely to get a Nobel Prize. So and then, okay, a lot compared to Asian people. Yeah. So, but researchers concluded that before it's because of high IQ of Jewish people. But however, Asian people have a little bit higher IQ. So that's not true. It's not IQ. So IQ is not really related to creativity. That's what I found by meta-analysis in 2005. Okay? So creativity, IQ is different. So then, why then the big difference between Asian people and the Jewish people? It was the cultural, means the parenting, a lot of parenting and the educational system. So one of the importance was the biggest difference is in Asian countries, you're not allowed to speak in class. Because you have to respectable, you have to listen, you have to obey, you have to just write down everything the teachers say, and then you get to test the scores. So I used to be high school English teacher there, and then my students wrote down everything, even my joke, because it's just in case it might be on a test. So it's just Asian people are really, really good at memorization. Okay? So and then you're not allowed to rebellious or argue, debate. So in Asian culture, we don't do any argue or debate, right? But compared to that, in Jewish home, Jewish Hebrew school, though, they encourage argument, debate, all these like rebellious attitude. So that is one of the very important factors. So we can definitely encourage in cultural difference in Asian culture. We can more encourage that, but it's really hard to change culture. But if we educate the teachers and parents, maybe we might. So there are many other cultural factors that I will talk about in the afternoon.
Thank you. Yes, Michael.
Last. Time for coffee.
Last question, promise. This is for Dr. Golding, Gerard Golding. You mentioned at the very beginning that in doing your study you had removed one of the axioms for quantum mechanics. You had this insight to remove the superposition axiom, and as a result, you got to explore new possibilities and new ways of looking at new theory, right? I'm a mathematician, and historically speaking, I can say that this was done
in Mathematics 2 by Bernard Riemann. Very good example, right? He removed the fifth axiom on Euclidean geometry, and at this time it was not seen as such a great idea, but later on, turns out Albert Einstein used this background to develop his theory of relativity. So it's been proven that thinking out of the box, looking at non-conventional physics, non-conventional mathematics, may lead to good results. So I just wonder if it would be a good idea for us as educators to incorporate courses that somehow would encourage creativity, thinking out of the box. I've been teaching for years conventional courses like algebra, precalculus, but I've never seen a course whose title is, for instance, unconventional mathematics or thinking out of the box mathematics. And I wonder if this course could be incorporated so for students to be able to explore new ideas and for instance, also you mentioned the value of giving a problem, not finding a solution, right? Not finding a solution. People tend to believe that giving a problem, there must be a solution, but there is a lot of value to prove that indeed there is no such a solution, right? So I wonder if this type of courses could be incorporated in our CUNY system for students who would be able or would be willing to take them, right?
Sorry, I know that was supposed to be the last question, but I just have one more short thought and comment that I wanted to add. A lot of the discussion that I heard today reminds me of a recent, Arlene Torres, who's University Dean of Diversity and Inclusion, has been holding these diversity dialogues, which have been really, really excellent, and I encourage everybody to attend upcoming ones. But there was a Dean Jackson from UPenn who was presenting on his success in sort of just opening up for his PhD program in anthropology. Students started having the option of turning in documentary films as opposed to standard dissertations. And just that one change opened up diversity within his program, that he started getting more diverse students applying to his program. And this was not engineered to increase diversity in any way, but he found by diversifying the output, he was diversifying the applications. And I think we've touched on this in a few different ways about the speed and accuracy. And I came into today thinking about, oh, this is fantastic. I'm going to learn about some new assignments that I might give to my students to help them be more creative. But I think, in thinking about Dean Jackson and kind of what I'm hearing from this group, that it's more about the output than the input, and not just saying, here's an assignment for you to find your creative, your creative motivation, but saying, one of the reasons why I think that the anthropology thing works is because what we have as standards for science are not built around diversity. The peer review process, for example, in most scientific journals has been shown that if you submit a name, the same article from a woman and a man's name, or the same article from a name with cultural diversity, the rejection rates are higher than for a standard Anglo-Saxon white male name. So the same paper submitted by a different name person has a less chance of success. And so the peer review process in science in general is biased, has an implicit bias in it. So by providing output opportunities and saying, here is what we need to do for this class, you need to demonstrate as part of this class that you have an understanding of this concept, but leaving it very open-ended about how they can demonstrate it, we might actually get at this creative process, right? And not saying you need to do a video, but to say, give me some proof that you understand what this concept is. So I want to thank the panel for, I think, really inspiring that for me, and thank everybody for the great discussion.
Something, but shortly because we have You have to be finishing.
Yeah, just to comment that that almost all of the great advances in history of mathematics have been based on taking something which was absolutely impossible and taking it to be possible. Non-Euclidean geometry is just one example. Even the concept of negative numbers was not widely accepted by mathematicians until the 19th century, because there couldn't be numbers below zero. It's impossible. So it's interesting to look at this and see how often that takes place. And then, of course, in physics too, things which were absolutely well known proved to be incorrect. One could go on and on with examples. So I think that what's been suggested to have very explicitly within the framework of some courses, the kind of course where the purpose is exploratory, where the purpose is creative, where the purpose is the investigation of alternate possibilities, and the evaluation method is not based on whether one comes up with the right answer or does something quickly, but is based on the depth of inquiry with many different ways of expressing that depth. I think this would be a wonderful innovation in STEM departments across the whole country. I try to do it in a course I give for prospective teachers, but the enrollment is limited to prospective teachers. I think it ought to be done as part of the undergraduate major in all of the STEM disciplines.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, first, thank you for this incredible discussion. I think we learned something, I learned something, right? That was very nice. The second thing is that now is the coffee time. And the third thing is that after the coffee time, what we scheduled is the 3 collaborative discussions in 3 areas: mathematics education, applied mathematics, and science and engineering. And in the program, you see the rules. So those are the rules. At the same time, I would like to request all of you, we really would like to have 3 discussions going. So try to get yourself like more or less in all 3 groups. I don't mean one person into 3 groups, but all of us into 3 groups. Thank you very much. I would like to invite you to have some coffee, juice, and then we continue our discussions. Thank you.